Yeah, kids are asleep. Okay, it's Facebook Live. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's on.
it's out. Just give me 1 minute. वो हो रहा है, redirect हो रहा है. Yep, we're live now.
Should we start?
Yeah, we're live now. Okay, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Kaarvan Crafts Foundation. Hina Sheikh, Maha Rahman, thank you so much for being here with us today. We have heard about COVID since last year. However, Pakistan went into, I would say, unofficial lockdown sometime around mid-March. And by unofficial, I mean around the time when schools shut down. Now, before I start asking you about the impact in Pakistan, I'd like to do a small introduction about our guest today. Hina Sheikh is a public policy specialist. She has been working in the development sector for over a decade now. Currently, she is working as the country economist for the Pakistan office of the International Growth Center, a joint initiative of LSE and the University of Oxford that operates in 17 other countries. She has worked extensively with donors and multilateral organizations, including DFID, World Bank, ADB, and the UN. We also have with us today Maha Rahman. Maha is Maha has a decade of experience in designing and executing evidence-based programs, projects, and policies to improve science, service delivery, and impact. She has led the analytics wing at SERP that is focused on embedding data in the decisions and operations of private and public sector companies to increase efficiency, impact, and profit. Prior to this, she has led research experiments at SERP and at World Bank in the fields of education, public finance, and governance. She combines her coursework in economics with her interest in entrepreneurship and is also a Pakistani Acumen Fellow 2016. She frequently writes for Dawn and other daily publications and blogs and is an adjunct faculty member at LUMS. Her current research interests include energy economics, education, and governance. Hina, Maha, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to start off with you, Hina. The big question that's been looming on everyone's heads, no matter who they are, what socioeconomic background they are, what job they do, what career they have, is how has COVID impacted the economy? Let's start off with, speaking broadly, and then we'll narrow it down. And of course, Maha, I'll be turning to you to explain the nitty gritty and to fight off the WhatsApp mania.
So, this virus has impacted the economy in multiple ways, both at the macro level and at the individual level. And I think while it's important to focus on the headline figures, the key statistics, the economic indicators, it's also just as important to really know the channels through which, this virus has impacted the economic health of the country. And this will make us realize actually that, the economic effects of this virus are multidimensional. And hence the solutions are not straightforward or simple, and it's a complex problem that the governments are struggling with all over the world. So, and Pakistan is definitely no exception to that. And now, I can give you some top line figures of how things are. I mean, it's a gloomy picture.
Please do. Please do. Then, Maha, I'll throw those figures at you to explain what they mean.
Yeah. So basically, ever since the lockdown, like you said, started in March, unofficially, but economy started, basic economic activity really slowed down. Since then, up till the fiscal year that ended in June, the economy has suffered a loss of 2.4 trillion rupees, which is just in like 4 months. So, and this is, and this is the first time in 68 years that Pakistan's economy has actually shrunk by 0.4%. Its GDP has gone down. It's never happened before. Even a GDP growth of 1% is considered, bad enough. So a negative growth really gives you an idea of the scale of the economic impact. And it's not going to end in this fiscal year. It's obviously going to spill over in the next year as well. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows that our country was already facing a lot of, fiscal challenges, and we were undergoing this we are undergoing an IMF stabilization program. So we did already expected our growth to be around 3%, but we did not expect this. So this is, even next year, indicate that our growth is not going to be more than 2%. Just hovering around 1%. But like one of the worrisome things is that this is something that the government itself has. These figures are official figures, and they're in the economic survey that was just released by the Ministry of Finance, and says that almost 56.6% of your entire population is socio-economically vulnerable. And imagine a nation of 210 million people. So that means 110 million people are actually facing multiple depressions. They kind of reinforce each other.
I think we have lost Hina.
Oh, I think we may have lost Hina. Maha, could you explain those figures that Hina was talking about? I mean, बंदा जब ये सुनता है तो इतना खौफ पैदा होता है. The fact that we lost trillions of rupees over the last 4 months, immediately I was thinking, बस मैं तो सड़क पे बस खड़ी हो जाऊंगी. That's I've lost my house, I've lost my car. What do these figures mean? इनसे क्या मुराद है?
नहीं, so I mean, just as Hina was saying, कि the COVID जो economic shock इसका है, that is going to be very significant. So we need to understand कि अभी जो 4 महीने में हमें effect नजर आया indicators पे, this will continue. That's a reality that we will need to face. That the effect is going to be there in the short term as well as the long term. अब जो 2008 का financial crisis था, उसमें the economy of the world, the global economy, contracted by 1.1%. But this time they are projecting that the economy will contract by 3%. So this shock is going to be many, many times bigger than the shocks that we have seen in the past. And as Hina was talking about a figure that's known as the GDP, the gross domestic product, uska matlab ye hota hai ki what is the monetary value of the goods and the services that have been produced in our country in the last 1 year. And uske under we are expecting a negative growth of 0.4% this year and a 1% growth next year. Why is our GDP contracting? Why is that a negative figure? That's because on one side the demand for these goods has gone down, and on the other side the supply shock bhi hai hamara. Ye dual shock hai to the economy. So our textile production has gone down, our beverage, food, tobacco, automobiles, iron and steel, क्योंकि construction सारी आपकी बंद है तो उसकी भी demand नहीं है. All those industries are producing much less than they were before COVID. And उसकी एक reason ये है कि हमारी consumer demand within the economy has gone down. And the second is because our economy is so interconnected, the demand in other countries where we were exporting these products has also gone down. So USA, UK, Germany, these were our top export markets. So वहाँ पे जो recession है, even they will, उधर जो recovery है, that's going to be a V-shaped recovery and that's going to take time. And until demand in those countries picks up, our export demand is not likely to pick up anytime sooner. So all this comes together to then translate into unemployment within your own country. So when the industries are not producing as much, they are not employing as many people. And just in the last 1 quarter, 1.4 million people have lost their jobs.
Yeah.
Tell me this. Unemployment has always been part of Pakistan's economy. It's a sad reality.
Yeah.
लेकिन इस दफा कोविड के साथ जो नजर आ रहा है, कभी सड़कों पे लोग नहीं बैठे थे काम के बगैर, यानी कि इनफॉर्मल सेक्टर के जो लोग होते थे, ये कैन यू प्लीज एक्सप्लेन कि व्हाट इज हैपनिंग है? हमेशा जब क्रेडिट क्रंच हुआ था 2008 में, ठीक है, bankers lost their jobs, banks, financial institutions shut down, old ones shut down, and we saw a global recession. However, this time around, it's not just the formal workers that are being affected. Am I correct in saying that?
You're absolutely correct. The thing is that, okay, let me just give you some numbers to understand. So, most of the South Asian countries are actually, the informal economy is really large. In fact, around 60 to 80% of the economy is informal, and it's just not documented. So these numbers are not there. So even, organizations like the IMF and the World Bank only give us estimates, so it's a wide range. Like they'll say 60 to 80% aapki economy is informal. Now, let me just give you an idea,
that is frightening. Maha, yahi baat ho rahi thi na, कि when somebody says that to me, or somebody sends that in a WhatsApp message या Twitter पे कोई आके ये post कर देता है और गालियां देते हैं government को, इसका क्या मतलब है? How would you explain that to a layman person?
And हमारी and the worrisome thing is this, कि हमारी जो Pakistan's population is actually, Pakistan is one of the youngest countries in the world, which means for the next 40 years our workforce is actually going to increase in size.
Yes.
So I mean, at one level it can be a big source for us, resource for us, right? But on the other hand, it can put pressure on our limited resources, and it can actually, I mean, the dividend we might not be able to reap it like that. So, and which can lead to civil, political unrest, and अब इनको नौकरी हमने देनी है, ठीक है? अब एक तो our workforce is around 61 million, ठीक है? Out of this, around 23 million are employed in the agricultural sector. जो non-agricultural sector है, उसमें से 70% is informal. Okay, so this is the problem. So, and so what does it mean when you say that this chunk is informal? It means that they're more prone to poverty. It means they're not legally recognized. It means that they do not have access to any social protection, social safety, social insurance mechanism, which means that when the informal economy stops working, they have absolutely no way of staying afloat until and unless the government sort of traces them, identifies them, and provides them with some form of relief, because they don't even have enough savings. And on top of it, they're even more prone to feeling the health shock of the virus, because they live in conditions which are, where social distancing is impossible. They don't have access to clean drinking water. They live in slums. So they're already more prone to being affected by the virus itself. So, and ये problem सिर्फ पाकिस्तान में नहीं है, पूरी दुनिया में informal economy का issue आया है, because this is the first time your informal economy has stopped functioning. मतलब आपके घर जो काम वाली आती है, I would even count people who are working for, like Uber and Careem drivers. This is not typical form of employment. So they do not have contracts or access to social insurance like proper formal sector employees do. So this problem is, even in the formal sector, our coverage of social protection is very low. Maha, do you want to add?
Maha, ये जो बताई बातें Maha Hina ने, I mean, those facts and figures, again, very frightening. So could you sort of put them in context? Okay, what does that mean for the average person on the road, not even people like ourselves who have access to the internet and have savings or have some form of employment coming in? इन लोगों के लिए क्या, इन numbers का क्या मतलब है? क्या होएगा इन लोगों के लिए?
Yeah, so no, Hina gives us some very important numbers. अगर उसको हम translate करें तो वो बनता है कि 51 million people who are working in the informal sector are unprotected right now. They don't have any formal mechanism in case they lose their jobs. Now there are two kinds of people in the informal sector. एक informal company here that is not registered, and then there are informal employees who not registered. And so informal employees may be working for a company that's registered, but those employees are not registered. So they don't come under any social protection program. So abhi jo Sanya ne bhi to, in order to reach this population, because you don't have any data, you don't know okay, what is where to find them, are they more what districts are they more in, you don't know their how, you don't know how to effectively target this population to devise a social protection program. So when you lost your job, or if you find yourself being unable to cope in COVID, तो आप इस number पे SMS करें and you will be eligible to receive a stipend. But that was a very small percentage. So while this COVID is thrown a lot of challenges our way, this is also an opportunity that we are able to document as much as possible of this informal economy. आप डेटा सिस्टम तरह के क्रिएट करें कि जितना आप इनको डॉक्यूमेंट कर सकते हैं ताकि कभी दोबारा इस तरह का शॉक आए, बट इवन राइट नाउ एंड अगेन यू आर एबल टू इफेक्टिवली रीच आउट टू देम, यू नो कि उनकी इनकम हाउ मच हैज द इनकम डिक्रीज्ड बाय. A survey that was conducted in Southern Punjab shows that some of these workers in the informal sector have lost up to 60% of their income. And they are the ones who are just dependent on their income. So there needs to be a formal mechanism which we are rapidly collecting data and we are rapidly documenting this sector of the economy. So this COVID chance for us to redefine our social contract. जो एक citizen और government के बीच में contract है, how do we rewrite that contract so that going forward we emerge stronger than we were going into the crisis?
ठीक है ना. मुझे एक बात आप बताएं, जो वहाँ बात कर रही हैं सोशल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट के बारे में और रीप्रोग्रामिंग ऑफ द mechanisms, what role do BIS and the ESAS program play there? ये क्या है?
So basically, I'll tell you कि जो informal workers हैं ना, actually they are worse off than actually at this situation even the poor who are being covered by the BIS program. BIS में ये होता है कि there's a cut off, right? So they only target the ultra poor. So they have done a survey and they've said कि हर household को score मिलता है, ठीक है? So जिस household का wealth asset score कम होता है, they are eligible for the stipend. Now naturally these informal workers were not under that threshold, right? So they are not being targeted by this. But what has happened is now a lot of these people, because they have no savings, they have actually fallen below that, and so they're falling into poverty. So we need to target them. BIS का बहुत role है इसमें, because they have the infrastructure in place to conduct the service, to go to the households, to do so. Initially ये जो BISP का जो एक survey करते हैं, it's called they have a registry, it's called the National Socio-Economic Registry, ठीक है? They actually it was meant to be a census, right? Where they would actually give every household sort of like a wealth index where you would be able to tell where they fall, ठीक है? Now that is something they can expand beyond just the ultra poor, and they will then be able to just, when a pandemic is a kind of a shock. Kal ko it could be another pandemic. It could be another health shock. It could be floods. It could be an earthquake. So when something like that happens, you have that database where you can quickly just target the most needy or vulnerable people. And abhi to ho ye raha hai ki initially jis tarah Maha ne kaha, they just they were not doing any targeting. They were trying to not being very selective, and they said कि हम जितने लोगों को दे सकते हैं हम उनको लेके आए. And इसमें a lot of people who were not eligible. I heard Nooria's talk, उसमें भी she mentioned the same thing कि उसकी domestic help were actually going to get themselves enrolled in these BISP programs. And मेरे साथ भी ये, my mother's driver cook was insistent that he wants to, आप मुझे ID card दें, I have to go and get. So she refused, and he was really angry. But the point is that I'm sure there was a lot of leakages, but that was the quickest way for them to reach out to these people. But you have to institutionalize this.
Maha, आप मुझे बताएं कि ये जितनी unemployment है, यानी 50% informal workers हैं, इनका अगले 6 माह में क्या होएगा, क्योंकि अभी लॉकडाउन तो रहेगा और इंडस्ट्रीज भी नहीं खुल रही, तो ये इनका क्या बनेगा? 51% they have to start all over again from scratch.
उसके अंदर एक तो नाउ वी हैव ट्रांजिशन मोर टुवर्ड्स अ स्मार्ट लॉकडाउन, तो हमने प्रेफरेंशियल जो इंडस्ट्रीज फार्मास्यूटिकल्स प्रोड्यूस कर रही हैं, जो इंडस्ट्रीज मेडिसिन प्रोड्यूस कर रही हैं, प्रोटेक्टिव गियर प्रोड्यूस कर रही हैं, सो textiles have very quickly pivoted towards producing protective gear. They are producing masks. So a lot of these industries have very quickly pivoted towards producing more goods that are needed in the in this COVID, in this pandemic. So there is a lot of demand that's coming in from these industries. That's one. The second thing is our health sector and our logistics sector are growing very fast. So while some industries have seen a very tough time, there are other industries that are growing very, very quickly. So logistics ke andar, all the retail shops that are now going online, they need a proper system so that they can deliver the goods. They need delivery boys, they need drivers. So they're also employing a lot of the people who just got unemployed. एक तो वो है, तीसरा पे जो हेल्थ सेक्टर के अंदर you also एक तो you need people directly giving dispensing health services. Then there are also people who are helping the health sector. Whatever industry is beefing up the health sector, whatever industry is producing the protective gear, they're producing masks. So there's a lot of demand and there's a lot from the industries that has very quickly pivoted. अब जब आप industries की बात करते हैं, तो then there's a related group of people coming back from UAE and Saudi and Qatar. So a lot of our workforce was also employed in Gulf and in other countries. Just in May, we have seen about an 18.6% drop in remittances because people in these countries have either lost their jobs or they're coming back. So that's another group that we need to help. अब ये वाला जो ग्रुप है, इसने खुद थोड़ा सा इनिशिएटिव शो किया है, ये लोग बाहर गए हैं, they have sought a different sort of an employment. So when the government is designing programs, it needs to design different programs for different groups of people. So people who are coming back from the Gulf countries, a very creative and a bold measure could be that you give them loans so that they can create their setup anew from this in this country, in their own country, so that you are helping them in some form. Then abhi aaj ek news आई थी कि जो PTDC है, then tourism has been affected. So PTDC has closed down its hotels and laid off all its workers as of today. So while they are protesting for their jobs, the government does need to either create a re-employment plan आप उनके लिए बनाएं, या उनको targeted offers दें, या आप उनको लोन दें कि वो अपना दोबारा से काम शुरू कर सकें. So जो हर ग्रुप अफेक्ट हो रहा है, इसके अंदर एक तो पहले आप रैपिडली डेटा कलेक्ट करें कि कौन अफेक्ट हो रहा है, उसके लिए सबसे सूटेबल पैकेज कौन सा है, और उसको उस तरह वो पैकेज डिस्पेंस करें, ताकि ये एक सिस्टम आपका सेटअप होना शुरू हो जाए थ्रू व्हिच यू कैन हेल्प पीपल हु आर बीइंग अफेक्टेड इन दिस पेंडेमिक.
Meher, I'd just like to add to that, one of the most immediate reactions that we can expect from the government, which is going to now be reflected in the annual development plans that the different departments make for the provinces, is that development expenditure is actually going to be cut down. So most of it is going to be infrastructure related. It is going to be, building roads, building underpasses, anything that involves labor. So that's, to revive the construction and to create employment. That's their biggest challenge, is to basically, and I know, the thing is that we need to understand there's a lot of criticism also. The government, the choices that the government has to make is not easy. The 1.24 trillion ka jo package Imran Khan ne announced kiya, our Prime Minister. Now, the thing is, you want to, fuel demand also, because there's a demand sort of crunch, right? But at the same time, this is a supply shock, because this is, your factories are closed, you're not producing, so wo aapki economic activity halt hogi. You cannot allow that to open. You cannot allow restaurants to start opening. You cannot allow gyms. You cannot allow cinemas. All of this is closed. So then when you're injecting money into the economy, what do you want? Ke log ghar se bahar nikal ke, you don't want that to happen either. You want them to do social distancing. So you need to be very careful ke it is confusing, because it can be counterproductive. And, the supply shock also reinforces the demand shock, because If restaurants are not open, you will not, I mean, if you're not socializing, you're not going to be spending on clothes, you're not going to be spending on gym wear, you are not going to be, getting a haircut, for instance, so you automatically, you're creating that sort of, your aggregate demand is falling. So, so what can the government do in this case? The first foremost thing is obviously to expand your, to provide relief to people that need it the most so that they stay afloat. Because this is going to pass eventually. So, you have to make sure that people are able to sustain their livelihood in some way.
Sure.
Just to add to what Hina said, there are a lot of very good examples and creative examples by how our startup industry has quickly innovated. So Airlift had to quickly cut down all its operations, लेकिन अभी उन्होंने थोड़े दिन पहले अपनी grocery service पर launch की है. So if you can't do X, Y, and Z, there are multiple other things that you can quickly pivot towards. So थोड़ा सा अगर हम small and medium enterprises की भी बात करें, तो उसके अंदर 48% have laid off some number of workers, and up to 23% have experienced up to 100% export loss. So,
very quickly, you just small, medium enterprises, do these fall into the formal sector or informal? Because generally speaking, these small businesses are unregistered because they claim कि हमारा इतना profit नहीं है to be, paying tax.
Yeah.
Could you just clarify that?
Anji, so whatever is registered with the government and whatever is legally documented falls in the formal sector. However, you will also have a lot of companies that are not registered with the government and that are not complying with the rules and regulations. Or they just say that they're too small to be registered. Or they say we don't know the rules and processes, or the rules and processes are too long and bureaucratic, and there's a lot of red tapeism to be followed. And so you find both kinds of enterprises within this category. And even in the formally registered SMEs, you have a lot of workers who are unregistered. For example, the male hired who's not registered. So that worker becomes a worker that's in the informal sector. Then there's a difference between an informal enterprise and a worker who is informally employed. So you find, so both categories are there.
You were saying that the small medium enterprise sector is doing well.
So there's a lot of discrepancy. So some of them have really had to struggle in terms of financially with their staff. What do? They have offices, uska rent pay karna hai, utilities to pay karna hai, but there's no business happening. But on the other hand, the SMEs that are operating, for example, in the tech sector, or that can quickly take their operations online, or that can quickly pivot towards an online model, they are very, very, they're doing very, very well. And they have even experienced up to 200% growth. For example, telemedicine. Sehat Kahani has achieved the targets that it set for the next year, just within this year by May. So there is a lot of stories of some businesses and some small companies doing very well as well. So you find both kinds of stories coming from these sectors. So it's very important for the government to know, okay, what are the sectors that they need to target on a priority basis. Now, Bangladesh has done something very, very interesting. Bangladesh ने क्या किया? उन्होंने एक priority list बना दी कि अब इस pandemic के अंदर ये 10 industries हमारे लिए ज़्यादा important है for the economy, as well as they'll be employing a larger part of the people more affected by the pandemic. तो there's a criteria जिस पे उन्होंने वो priority list बनाई है कि हमने अगर open करना है तो सबसे पहले इनको open करना है, support देना है तो सबसे पहले इनको support देना है. So that kind of mapping is also going to be very, very important for Pakistan. And that is the kind of language you want our policy makers to be speaking. कि ये industry हमने इसलिए खोली है क्योंकि ये इतने लोगों को इस district में employ करेगी, या इतने लोगों को who previously had jobs and they don't have jobs and they don't even want to apply for a loan or ask anyone for help, is going to re-employ them. So there's a need to learn from the success stories in the region. The South-South learning is very important. What is India doing well? What is Bangladesh doing well? What are the African countries doing well? So Hina can speak more on the African story.
With regards to the small, medium enterprises, do you think that they are going to continue to grow? I mean, compared to, let's say, the larger industries, which, as Maha already touched upon, that they're struggling. to retain workers, although there's a lobby that says कि जी क्या ज़रूरत थी इनको निकालने की, थोड़ी थोड़ी जो तनख्वाहें हैं दे ही देते.
So obviously, SMEs have the larger companies have a lot at stake, much more than smaller companies. And like Maha said, कि इसमें से a large chunk is I mean, they're kind of somewhere in between being regular and formal and informal. So either they are formal, but they hire, so they will underreport the number of people they're hiring so that they don't have to register or pay taxes because there's a minimum, you know, आपके size पे depend करता है and everything. So the thing is that but they have a big opportunity. I feel right now because we were obviously digitization of the economy is happening in Pakistan also. There are lots of startups. Lots and lots of startups. There is a lot of e-commerce. Retailers are now shifting there. So these, you know, small, medium enterprises, even a lot of these, you know, a lot of them are doing their work through social media platforms. They will all have an opportunity. Yeah, so now they have an opportunity to basically they were already on that path, but it's just going to expedite that process, right? So I think the government needs to focus on developing an e-commerce framework which supports the SMEs so that they are guided properly to move in this direction and provide them incentives and knowledge and support. Because now that is the easiest way. We don't know when we will be able to remove the containment measures for this virus, which means so we need to be prepared for this. And frankly speaking, this is not going to be the last pandemic of our lifetime. I feel that, you know, we will always be at this risk because now we're more prone to, being affected by such pandemics because the world has never been this populated. Secondly, we have never been this densely populated, right? So rural to urban migration is, you know, you're just living so close by that the spread of the disease just speeds up. And also travel. I mean, travel has reached unprecedented levels. So the way, it's inevitable that, you know, a virus from one end of the world will travel to the other end of the world. So we need to have these, we need to just use technology to our advantage.
Maha, Hina just said something very interesting, that rural to urban migration is taking place constantly. However, with the pandemic, whatever little, you know, informal workers there were in urban centers such as Lahore, we've seen that some of them have actually gone back to their rural roots because they don't have work. शहरों में काम नहीं है, शहरों में रहने की जगह नहीं है. Do you think that there's going to be a stronger investment in agriculture now, knowing that at the end of the day, Pakistan is still very much dependent on agriculture as compared to its textile production, manufacturing, or even services sector?
Yeah, so you are bringing up a very important point. So while our industrial and services sector have seen a negative growth of 2.6 and 0.6% respectively, agricultural sector has actually grown by 2.7%. So agriculture,
okay, now explain those numbers now.
So the total productivity of agriculture as compared to last year has gone up by 2.7%. So if you look at the production in May 2020 compared to May 2019, the productivity, the total value of everything that has been produced in this sector cumulatively has gone up by 2.7%. लेकिन अगर आप within the agriculture sector देखें तो there has been a large fall in the production of cotton. And cotton is a very important input in a very important industry of Pakistan. So there are some commodities within agriculture whose production has increased, while there are some commodities whose production has gone down. उसके अंदर कोविड के अलावा भी और reasons हैं. We have had a locust attack that has affected the productivity of crops in all provinces of Pakistan. And that impact is expected to last all summer because we are expecting forms of locusts to come into the country from Iran and from Afghanistan as well as from India. And so we need to be prepared for that. That's one thing. The second thing is that while our agriculture sector has done well, जुलाई और अगस्त के जो मंथ्स हैं सीजनली हमने देखा है कि इन 2 महीनों में फूड इनसिक्योरिटी ज्यादा होती है. They're larger number of population who is struggling to get the required resources or get the required nutrition. So the government then needs to be prepared कि इस दफा सिर्फ वो seasonal food insecurity नहीं होगी, इसके अलावा कोविड से वो impact exacerbate होगा, locust attack से वो impact exacerbate होगा. So एक तो आपका agriculture है, आपकी crop production, दूसरा आपका livestock है. So while your livestock production has also seen a minimal increase, but now the pandemic, the sale and the sale that's going to go back to the people who've been preparing for Eid al-Azha all year round is not going to be the same as it was last year. तो उसके अंदर अगर आप if you don't allow them to create a marketplace like you do every year, जिसको उर्दू में मंडी कहते हैं, so then then that's also another shock that the government needs to be aware of and needs to be prepared for. फिर या तो आप इसके लिए एक इसको भी ऑनलाइन शिफ्ट करें, create some mechanism that you're connecting anyone who's bringing their cattle and their livestock into urban areas to be able to do the same with some online platform. So that's another avenue that the government needs to be prepared for, along with the pandemic and the locust attack, the impact of which is going to continue. And so there needs to be very targeted policy. Okay, what are the areas that are home to what crop? What is the production? उसमें कितनी yield per acre आपको पंजाब से आ रही है, सिंध, बलोचिस्तान. So there's very detailed data actually available on this, as opposed to the informal economy. Agriculture का data हमारा बहुत well kept and well collected here, down to the nearest detail. So we're getting the numbers on a weekly basis for Punjab and for all other provinces. So this is something that the government is very well prepared for.
But on that point, I just want to add just something that yes, the COVID crisis has impacted both the urban and the rural economy, but I feel that COVID is actually, and it is mostly an urban issue. And thankfully, Pakistan has not suffered the kind of, there has been no breakdown in the supply chains really. So we have thankfully been able to maintain that. So there hasn't been any shortage of wheat or sugar, of the essential goods. So that is a good thing. But, just to be able to control this virus and your health facilities, all of they are getting overwhelmed, but it's all in the cities, and cities mein spread ho raha hai, cities mein containment is an issue. Ab wo log bhaag ke apne rural areas mein chale gaye because things over there are just continuing as normal. वहाँ पे छोटी छोटी markets भी खुली हैं, वहाँ पे लोग अपनी करियाना stores ये वो सब कुछ खुला है, people are going on as if things are normal. But it's the cities, the urban centers that are suffering the most. And we need to also rethink of how we have allowed our cities to, develop. We need to really start, investing in the right infrastructure to be able to, and, just make, this is haphazard urbanization, right? And all these fractures are being exposed because of this one pandemic.
Maha, if what Hina says applies to Pakistan, then why is it in the past few days we saw that जहाँ पे गंदम की कीमत की आ रही थी बात, गांव देहातों में गंदम ज्यादा महंगी हो रही थी बनिस्बत शहरों की? Why is that?
Because हमारी जो supply chain है ना, उसके लिए we need to go back and understand कि how are our supply chain set up. So our supply, what are the priorities के जो हमारा wheat procurement का system है, once we procure wheat, what are the areas in which it is distributed? What are the points in which it is being distributed? उसके अंदर, जैसे Hina said, कि this is revealing cracks beyond just the health system. So we need to understand the supply chains and what the distribution is, and what are the points at which it is being dispensed and through whom, and what are the points at which this supply chain is being broken down. One thing that Hina said was very, very interesting कि एक तो चीज पाकिस्तान में हुई है कि जब हमने लॉकडाउन खोला है, so a lot of our sectors have quickly bounced back, which is something very different from the developed world. So in US, even with the lockdown easing, a lot of their industries and a lot of their businesses have not been able to bounce as quickly as some of the businesses and the companies and the industries in Pakistan have been able to quickly bounce back and regain some of the lost productivity due to the month in which that we were sort of lockdown. वो भी partial lockdown नहीं था, but we were sort of lockdown. So उसके अंदर that's like a positive for the developing countries. But also going back to another point that Hina picked up on urban versus rural. अब एक तो urban center में yes हम सबसे ज़्यादा impact एक तो जो हमारे cities ज़्यादा connected थे लाहौर, Karachi, they have been worst hit. Then there's Quetta, there's Peshawar, but then there's also another pattern that's emerging कि जो लोग the cities that were host to more migrant population, जैसे Gujarat, as well as in Delhi, there were some cities that were host to a bigger migrant population. Because जो लोग वापस आ रहे हैं, they're 300% more likely to show COVID symptoms. तो अब वहाँ पे this pandemic has grown quicker, and you've seen a bigger impact in those cities which were host to more migrant families. So besides the rural-urban divide, this is another dynamic that has emerged in the COVID spread in the country. And that's also then impacting other channels in terms of agriculture, industries, otherwise. And then going back to the point on pricing, a lot of the prices, जैसे शुरू में हमने देखा कि जैसे beef और mutton की prices increase हुई, लेकिन chicken की after it saw a drop because people thought कि oh, this is transmitting coronavirus. And also because restaurants are using more of chicken and शादियों में ज़्यादा use होता था. तो जब वो सब कुछ बंद हो गया, एक पहले तो इसकी price नीचे गई है. अब वो भी quickly that has also caught up and that's also increasing. So all the meat prices are increasing. While बहुत सारी और commodities में increase हुआ है, potato is increasing, but there are also some vegetables, let's say tomato and onions, which are going down. So there are also differential dynamics when you're looking at prices within these agricultural commodities. And that's also something that's very interesting to track in terms of what cities were being affected or वहाँ पे productivity की कितनी impact हुई है. So there's some forthcoming work that I have that I'll be putting out shortly on this. How has the productivity been affected in cities where the spread of the virus was quicker as opposed to other cities? So yeah, differential dynamics at play here.
So we're heading towards the end now. So Hina, I'd like to ask you, what is it that how do you think Pakistan's government should act from this moment onwards?
So the thing is that, this is not like, it's very different. A pandemic is a very different source of sort of a recession. It's not like a normal shock. Okay? It's a health shock plus an economic shock. So when you think of a pandemic, you obviously think about people suffering from the disease. You need to divert your resources to the health sector. But in Pakistan, we did not feel the health shock. We actually felt the economic shock way before the health shock. Okay? So we went into a lockdown way before. So our economy was at halt. जब हमारे पास 2 या 3, 4 cases थे, literally 1, 2 करके बढ़ रहे थे. So अब जब हमारे पास 2 lakh हो गए हैं या पता नहीं, I've stopped counting now. So the point is कि it is a tricky situation. The government tried to follow that route of containing the virus, but it didn't. We have to, I think we need to invest in our health infrastructure. We have never been good at responding to shocks because हमारे मुल्क में floods हर साल आते हैं. हर साल floods आते हैं. Every year we struggle to provide shelter, to go and provide relief, and then we call in the army कि वो हमारी assistance करे. So हमारे पास institutional setup कोई नहीं है. So I feel this is a time when the government needs to invest in the health infrastructure in a way that it becomes shock responsive. It needs to invest in social protection in a way that it becomes shock responsive, and you can expand the coverage to include people who become newly vulnerable groups, right? So हर एक किस्म की shock में different groups of people will be affected. So this is something that needs to be worked on. उसके अलावा obviously they're like I said, immediately what they will be doing is trying to create employment opportunities, and like I said, I think e-commerce, these are 3 things that the government needs to have a long-term strategy for.
Definitely, absolutely. Maha, how does one contain the panic created by facts and figures that are reported in the media? Do you feel that there is a gap in the communication between what the figures have to say and how the public is understanding them, and whose responsibility is it to
Yeah, no,
explain?
that's a great question. If there's one thing that the government also admits that it could have done better, that is communication. And
Yeah,
data plays a very central part in communication. जब असद उमर से या बाकी किसी मिनिस्टर से पूछें कि आप क्या differently क्या बेहतर कर सकते थे, तो they're like we would have communicated better. And to communicate better, data is at the center of a lot of these figures. So a lot of this has to be seen in context. कि जब testing numbers come थे, then you need to look at the case over the test ratio rather than looking at tests separately and cases separately.
Exactly.
Similarly, when you're looking at deaths, look at deaths as a ratio of deaths over the total positive cases. So contextualize the data and try and understand what each number is saying. फिर एक बहुत ज़्यादा important debate आई है आपकी कि where is our curve headed? What is the curve? What is R naught? When will we peak? Why can't we calculate this every day? So there needs to be some understanding of what R naught is. It's indicative of the spread. Why can't it be calculated on a daily basis? Because there's a lot of input that goes into it. And then the more data you have, the more precise estimates that you can have about where we are heading. Initially, you may be off, and as you go towards the peak, you will start making better predictions. So, uske andar, while Hina is talking about setting up health systems, I would emphasize that we need to set up robust data systems.
Yes,
जब ये pandemic hit हुआ, तो sitting at NCOC, Tanya and Asad and other people could not tell our population कि कहाँ bed खाली है, कहाँ ventilator खाली है. It took some amount of effort to get that system together. So let this pandemic not be a wasted opportunity. We can create better systems. We can create health systems, better social protection systems, all of which rest on very robust data systems that will only make your communication stronger. So while within the pandemic, you want to quickly collect data, make quick data-driven decisions, there needs to be effective communication. And in light of the data and the response coming from the public, there needs to be real-time accountability. You can't wait for the pandemic to be over to say, okay, you've done this well, and this is something great at. You need to quickly reassess what you're doing, admit the mistakes you make, and not keep repeating. Sometimes the U-turn is what you need.
I think, bilkul.
Yeah.
A lot of the issues with the, ये जो awareness messaging and communication में, why you are unable to actually cause any changes in behavior, which is, I mean, in Pakistan, that's been a complete failure. We haven't been able to change people's behaviors through messaging, is because there's a trust deficit. And trust deficit kyun hai? Because of all this communication, these numbers, they keep changing. You basically don't have that trust in the government that what they are communicating to you, they actually have evidence, and this is based on some actual, numbers, because every day they keep changing their, pehle wo kehte peak will come in April, then they say it'll come in May, then they'll say it'll come in August. There are actual epidemiological studies that you can do to get, this information. So I think that's also, it'll really help build that trust between the citizen and the government if you get good real-time data.
Yeah, and the government doesn't need to be protective of the data that's coming in. Open up your data and have 20 people do this modeling for you. Your response is only going to get better. Because जब आप data लोगों को दिखाएंगे कि आप इधर रह रहे हैं, इधर इतनी तेजी से ये spread हो रहा है, तो compliance भी ज़्यादा होगी. So there's going to be data-driven compliance. So you can only make your response stronger by sharing more data. So that's something the government really needs to understand and not be protective of the numbers. अभी ये हो रहा है कि कोई एक press conference आपने देख ली तो आपको थोड़ा सा पता लग गया. फिर you catch another person on some talk show तो आपको कुछ पता लग गया. रात को आपको एक miss हो गया तो आपको पता, you don't know what the government is doing the next day. You miss an announcement, so you don't know your area is locked down the next day. So all this also needs to be done in a very coordinated and a systemic way.
Absolutely. I mean, you just have to log on to YouTube and you'll find hundreds of channels of informal, गांव के लोग और अपने वो dairy farms की सारी documentation करें on YouTube channels, and it makes you wonder that if these people जिनको आप लोग कहते हो कि ये अनपढ़ हैं, ये जाहिल हैं, if they can figure out how to market themselves, if they can figure out how to share tips about buffalo farming, then surely the government can really get its act together and put together cohesive. I mean, they have created the COVID app, but I believe that has its issues as well in terms
They
of
have the
privacy.
resources. They have the resources. I think it's just that they need to really stick to a stance and they have to show commitment. Otherwise, we have the resources to do this, in terms of manpower as well, expertise, sab hai, but ek
Yeah.
commitment chahiye.
Chale, hopefully after seeing this talk, the government will be more committed.
Thanks to
Yeah.
you for coordinating this.
Organizing this, yes.
Thank you, Hina. Thank you, Maha, for coming
Thank
on.
you, Meher. This
Really
was really
Pleasure.
nice.
Yeah, it was
breaking
very
it
interesting.
down.
Thank you.
And this will be on our Facebook. So please do like, share, comment. And thank you so much, ladies,
Will
once
do.
again. It's wonderful to
Thank
have
you.
female speakers and female economists who know what they're talking about. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us. That was Hina Sheikh and Maha Rahman. Stay safe and speak to you next week. Hafiz.